I want to turn to, again, more bad policy with more stupid people. And that would be the latest and greatest out of Joe Biden. Check out how the New York Post is characterizing his new budget. I love this. This is great, you guys. Leave it to the Post, right? Leave it to the Post. They've got a great graphic and they're like, woo, spending spree with all these dollars floating all around Joe, because that's what it is. He just wants to give away, give away, give away money. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, we are in the middle of an election season. So of course it's a spending spree. Why wouldn't it be a spending spree? Can you believe this? I love this. New York Post saying he's got a $5.5 trillion budget with lots of plans for giveaways. It is actually the highest peacetime burden in U.S. history. So we're at peace, we're not at war, and yet he wants to give out all this money every which way you can possibly imagine. And some of the things that really upset me include that he wants a wealth tax, right? Because God forbid you actually get wealthy. If you make more than $400,000 a year, Joe Biden's coming for you. I mean, unless you're smart enough to be able to figure out things like Hunter Biden did, right? Where you just don't declare the income at all. Allegedly. Although I think that's been pretty much confirmed. And then there's other things in there. You know, he wants to give away like 8.5 billion and more food stamps and food cards. And he wants, he's clinging to that student loan thing. He's got to have something to campaign on. And then he wants to get people to pay taxes based on whatever value they have in their portfolios. It's called mark-to-market accounting. So, you know, even if you haven't sold any of your stock, if your stock in Disney today is worth $100, even if it's going to go to 50 next year, Joe Biden wants you to pay tax on the $100 that he thinks it's worth right now. He wants a capital gains tax on that, even though you haven't sold the stock. I mean, none of this makes any sense at all. I'm telling you, this is what you call bad economic policy. You know who knows this? None other than Alfredo Ortiz from Job Creators Network, my good friend. I'm so happy to have him on the show today. We sat down just before I came to air with you. Take a look. Alfredo Ortiz, head of Job. Oh, what better day to have Alfredo Ortiz from Job Creators Network with us. I mean, I'm like blown away by this, Alfredo. This just hit a few hours ago. Let's start here. Yeah. On what Biden wants to do with capital gains, because this is bad news for all investors, frankly, in my estimation, and the American economy in general. I'm stunned at the stupidity and frankly, what are we becoming? Some kind of communist socialist nation? What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. He dropped this on Congress a couple of hours ago, but I mean, this budget for 2025 is absolutely ridiculous. It is much more of what Biden has been doing for 3 years, tax and spend, but this is taken to a whole new level. Military spending, first of all, is actually negative territory when you account for inflation. But spending on, all these other programs, domestic programs, it's up 3-4%. So it's just absolutely ridiculous. So, for example, he's dropping $280 billion on building affordable housing. I mean, look, Trish, we have a housing problem, obviously, in this country, but we just can't we can't afford to keep.
Well, it's just going to drive prices up. I mean, it's the same with, they look at college education. They're like, gee, why is there so much inflation in college education today, Alfredo? And it's like, guys, do you think that maybe the government subsidies had anything to do with it? I mean, the same thing will happen, frankly, for housing. Here they are trying to fix for affordable housing. Housing's so expensive. You start adding government subsidies. Guess what? It's going to get really expensive.
It's absolutely true. I mean, it's ridiculous. We sued on the whole college loan thing. Forgiveness program went all the way to the Supreme Court, and we're really happy with the actions that we did there to stop that. But he's now doing what, $140 billion after the Supreme Court said you can't do it, after Congress said you couldn't do it. So again, lawless Biden, there he goes, just spending this money like a drunken sailor. But I mean, if you really think about it, this loan program, for example, just on college loans, student forgiveness is going to be almost $500 billion, $500 billion, Trish. I mean, if he's spending $280 billion, to build 2 million affordable housing units, I mean, shoot, he could take that $500 billion and build what 4 million. I mean, instead of buying votes from the youth, like what he's doing here, he could actually put it to use if he's going to spend that money, not just kind of forgive it. And to your point, it's not really helping the kids, right? I mean, it's forgiving the loans, but all the colleges are going to do, they keep inflating and inflating and inflating tuition costs.
Oh, I
Yet
know.
they're sitting on $700 billion of endowment.
Not to mention, it's very true. Yeah, Harvard, come on, right? But not to mention that they're not teaching young students really anything that they can even use nowadays. And not to mention, not everybody's graduating. I mean, what they're doing to young people with these colleges in terms of, in my estimation, influencing their minds in really, frankly, negative ways that will make it harder for them to earn a living. It's just devastating. But
Yeah.
I want to zero in on something else that is really concerning to me. One, you get a wealth tax in there, and two, he wants to tax unrealized capital gains. Now, just to put this in English for people, think of it like this. You know what? Hey, your house goes up in value. It used to be worth $300,000. Now Zillow tells you it's worth $500,000, or hey, maybe whatever Letitia James thinks it's worth, right? So, there's some estimate on your house. It's now worth $500,000. What, you're supposed to pay more in taxes to the federal government? They're doing this with the stock market. So if your stock equity that you have in a company, if your portfolio goes up, they're going to say, well, it's worth this much, so now you have to pay tax on it, even though you don't sell the stocks, even though the stocks might be worth zero the next year. I mean, Lehman Brothers comes to mind, right? That was a stock that went to flat out zero. I mean, is he high? What kind of insane plan is this, Alfredo?
Yeah, no, it's just absolutely ridiculous. And to your point, are they going to refund you the money, right? If it drops in value, then of course not, right? I mean, they are going to spend the money. And so
then why would you invest in stocks?
Yeah, exactly. It's a one-way highway, right? So they're going to increase these taxes. Of course, they're going to spend it. And again, it's just, Biden playing the old tax and spend game here, election year, right? So they basically are buying votes and saying, oh, look, we're going to go ahead and fund it. And the most ironic thing is if you look at the 10-year projection on this thing, it's still about $1.7 trillion deficit spending every single year. But then they're claiming that they're actually saving $3 trillion of debt basically over the next 10 years. All they're really doing is that they've actually haven't increased it by the full amount. I think it was an estimated 20 trillion. So now they're only going to spend 17 trillion. So now he's claiming that he's going to save $3 trillion on this budget over the next 10 years.
My
It's
gosh.
just ridiculous.
No, it is ridiculous. I mean, thankfully, I don't think this will get passed in Congress, but you know what, Alfredo, it actually highlights how important it is right now to make sure you have the right people, not just in the White House, but you got to have the right people in Congress. You got to have the right people in the Senate. You got to have people that are thinking with their heads as opposed to, oh, how many votes can I gather? I mean, I'm sorry, but I think everyday Americans, they're still aspirational. They still want to believe in the American dream. They still know that, hey, they got to put some money in their 401k if they want to have a shot at retirement someday. Right. And they don't want to have to be shelling out taxes every time the stock market goes up when they haven't even sold the stocks.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Trish. And this is actually a really important point that you're making, I think, because, there's a lot of conversation now, of course, with 2024 election, just 8 months away, basically, is it Trump versus Biden? And quite frankly, who knows if it's really going to be Biden, right? I still have a big question mark on that. But I think it should be something that we're looking at regardless of the person, right? Whether it's Trump versus Biden or Trump versus Obama, whether it's Trump versus, Whitmer, it doesn't really matter, or Newsom. These are failed policies of the Democrat Party at all levels of government, Trish, from, if you think about it, really from city councils to mayors, to governors, to senators, to congressmen, right? To the entire Biden cabinet, all the way up to Biden, right? This is failed policy at every single level of government, right? We know we have actually lived a successful agenda, which is under the Trump administration. And now we've lived a very failed agenda under the Biden administration. And so I don't think it could be ever more clear, but my wish is that it not be talked about as one person versus another person, Trump versus Biden,
Oh, I
right?
know,
But it
because it's
really is
policy.
one
I
agenda
know.
of policy that's been successful versus,
Yeah,
again,
no,
totally
I hear
different
you.
agenda.
I mean, look, I'm such a policy nerd. The viewers know that about me. I'm like, I'm probably the only one who like sits around on a Friday night and actually reads the tax policies of every candidate. Like,
I hate to admit
I
that,
can
but I
walk
probably
out
do
on
too.
this with the
So
best of them, but it's what had me back in 2016 for Trump. I remember saying to colleagues, I worked at Fox at the time, I was like, don't count him out. Don't count him out. Did you
right,
see the tax policy? And they're like, what? And I'm like, no, really. Ted Cruz has a VAT tax. I mean, I love Ted, but there was a VAT tax in
yeah,
there. And I'm like, it's a hidden thing. Like, this is the purest, best tax policy I've seen from any candidate, like in a long time. And I am a policy nerd. He's got a lot of personality, and look, I happen to like it. I think he's hysterical. I think he's funny. I think he's super authentic, and I think he's a showman, and he gets it. But a lot of people don't like him, right? So that's like a high
yeah,
beta personality. You love him or you hate him. But again, just going back to your point, like forget about personality for a second. Policy matters, and this was the whole problem with Biden. He had, frankly, in my estimation, kind of like no policy. And when he comes up with the policy, it's because he's trying to appeal to his darn base. He's not a leader. He's not taking anybody in a direction. It's like, oh, I stand with Israel. Oh, no, I don't stand with it. Now we got to do something for Gaza because my base,
yeah,
Rashida Tlaib and the rest of them are getting the base, the extremists all riled up. And we got an
yeah.
election coming up. Or this, which is just plain old class warfare.
It is. It absolutely is. And, he's making the point, for example, on the tax increases that, the wealthy have to continue paying their fair share. I mean, I'm so sick and tired of hearing that phrase, Trish, because, they're already paying the most of the 1% that they've ever paid as a percentage of total
Well,
tax
unless
revenue.
you're a private equity investor, and
Well,
no offense against those guys, I have a lot of friends that are, but I'm sorry, like a lot of them donate big time, frankly, to both parties, right? So they
yeah,
keep their
yeah,
little fat cat tax loophole, while everybody else, you make 401,000, and boy, Joe Biden's coming for you. Of course, if you're off the hook somehow. Don't get me started on
right.
that.
Yeah, no, it's just really ridiculous, and it is class warfare. This thing that he's saying, that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act actually led to a decrease basically in tax revenue. Such a falsehood, because what tax revenues are up, I think 33%.
Hmm.
Since the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, so it's actually helped revenues. I mean, if you go back to the Kennedy years, what did Kennedy say? That the best way to increase tax revenue is to cut the tax
He
rates.
cut taxes. I know.
I mean,
It doesn't have to be political.
I know it, and not at all. And he knew that that was actually the best way to help an entire economy, right? And it's just ridiculous what
It's
Biden is
so here's
doing.
the thing. You guys, I talk about you every day on the show. I love what you're doing. I absolutely
Thanks,
love it.
Trish.
I mean, you are out there fighting the fight for everyone. And I say this all the time to the viewers, and we have, a lot that write in and are thankful for this. I mean, and you guys, like, we love you because you at JCN, and I encourage everybody to go to joinjcn.com, because you guys are out there making sure that these issues are being paid attention to. Small business owners, they don't have a big enough voice. I mean, you've got
Yeah,
the big companies out there that are spending all this money lobbying, but what you're able to do is really be an advocate for small, of which I am one now too, because I own this
yeah,
show and I
you are.
own
You
my own
are.
media company, and I feel so passionately. I mean, I always have, but it's more acute now, knowing that we've got to do more to protect small business owners who are the lifeblood of this economy. You
Yeah,
guys are out there training them too, which I just think is phenomenal, to be advocates in their community. I know you
yeah.
provide media training. You're looking for new voices right now. So everybody go to Join JCN. JoinJCN.com, Job Creators Network. This is like, frankly, this is nothing against the Chamber of Commerce, but you guys are kind of like that on steroids. You're doing so much more. You don't have the wokeness. You really
Right.
believe in the policy itself, to give more to the people and more to the communities and the individuals that are creating opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, I was a small business owner myself. I had two small businesses I started in Atlanta. I'm a son of immigrants. I mean, I know what this country can do. I know what, I mean, I'm living proof of it. I mean, I started basically in poverty.
Wow.
growing up in San Diego, education really, and a hardworking mom and the God that I believe in, right, has
Yeah.
done amazing things to get me to this point. But I honestly believe, Trish, that this could only be done in this country, and that's why we do have a flow of immigrants coming here, right? I don't see many immigrants leaving. They're coming here because they just believe in that American dream. I mean, we are kind of a little concerned, obviously, on the border security, but we won't talk about border right now.
No,
Um,
but by the way, for small business owners, it's a big issue too.
because of the crime issue. I mean, and this is a real issue. I mean, it's right in front of their doorsteps. And Target can close a few stores in San Francisco, and Walmart can do the same, and it's not going to really hurt their business, right? Overall, if you have a one, mom and pop storefront anywhere, right, and you have crime issues, and you have to close your store, that's it. You've lost your entire dream, your life savings, and this is a real issue that's impacting everyone. I mean, in New York, for example, I mean, it is really, this issue is on steroids in New York. Unfortunately, for those businesses that couldn't leave, they're closing up. Some of them have actually escaped, and they're moving to Tennessee, to Florida, to Georgia. But for those businesses that can't escape this, I mean, that's it. I mean, they're done.
Yeah. It's terrible. It's terrible, and something has to be done. There's just so much to talk to you
Yeah.
about. I look forward to having you back very, very soon. Great day to have you here, Alfredo Ortiz. Make sure everybody go to joinjcn.com. There's so many resources there for you. These guys are fighting the good fight. Thank you so much, Alfredo.
Thanks, Trish.
They're fighting a fight, and listen, I'm just saying this is a fight that has to be had right now, because you look at this crazy stuff that the president is coming out for with his new budget, and he's calling for all these higher taxes. He was up in Manchester, New Hampshire today. He's trying to tell us he's a capitalist. He told us he was a capitalist at the State of the Union the other night, and now he's saying again, because you see, any moron could tell you that the policies he's putting forward are hardly capitalist. No, these are totally socialist in nature. He's got a big socialist rooting there with what he's trying to push forward. So, he's trying to say, I'm really not. Listen to him.
And now it's my goal to cut the federal debt even more by making big corporations and the very wealthy begin to pay their fair share. I'm not anti-corporation. I represent the state of Delaware. More corporations incorporated in Delaware than every other state in America combined. But guess what? But I'm a capitalist, man. Make all the money you want. Just begin to pay your fair share in taxes. You got to remember the big fight I had not long ago, and the reason why I was able to cut the deficit already by $7 billion in the first year. And that was because we found out that we wanted to make sure that there were 50 corporations that made $40 billion in 2021. Didn't pay a penny in taxes. I did an awful thing. I convinced us all to raise it to 15%. Isn't that awful? And it paid for everything that we've paid for what we've done so far and still cut the deficit. Look, a fair tax code is how we invest in things that make this country great. From healthcare, education, defense, and so much more, research, development.
I can't believe he says this with a straight face. Oh, I'm a capitalist. Make all the money you want. Just make sure you pay your fair share. Unless, of course, you're Hunter Biden. They don't pay anything. Come on. Like, I'm sorry. This pay your fair share business, it's really exhausting, because I've told you this before, but all his buddies in the private equity industry that give all this money to his campaign, they don't have to pay their fair share. Nope. They get away with treating their income as though it were capital gains. I mean, would this change under the new budget proposal that's going to go after capital gains? I don't know about that. I went through the whole thing, and I didn't see any mention of the private equity tax loophole. But he's trying to sit there with a straight face and say, I'm a capitalist. Just pay your fair share. Well, what is your fair share? Do you think it's really fair to charge American corporations so much more than they would be charged anywhere else in the world? I mean, you got to have that little equilibrium, right? Like that Art Laffer talked about so brilliantly, the Laffer curve that he drew on the napkin for Ronald Reagan. I love Art. He's a dear friend, has been a great mentor over the years, because I just value his view on the economy so much. we got to get him back on the show. But anyway, Art would say, look, at some point, you reach that threshold where companies don't want to be in business. And guess what? They've found a better place to go, and that would be Ireland. Thank you very much. So let's forget having them go overseas. Let's keep them here. Let's incentivize all the American corporations to be here. And let's disincentivize the Chinese corporations from making cheap stuff in, say, Mexico, as the former president was talking about on CNBC this morning, by putting tariffs on them. I mean, it's, again, not that hard. But Joe Biden is rigging the game so that ultimately it comes back to hurt you, right? I mean, if you're the family and you got like a firefighter and a teacher, or I don't know, like if you manage to make $400,000 with two people working, he wants to treat you like he's going to treat the billionaires, the millionaires. I'm sorry, this is not the American spirit that we all love, ladies and gentlemen. It's just not. And he's not a capitalist. No, he's a socialist, right out of Obama's team. I mean, Obama's a socialist too. Remember you didn't build that business? That's exactly who these people are. And they think that they can redistribute your wealth. Because maybe you made a decision to go to vocational school and become an electrician, and maybe you built a heck of an electrician's business, or you became a plumber. You're doing real work, okay? And you build a heck of a business, but somehow it's your responsibility to pay for the kid that wants to go and do gender studies at some Timbuktu university from which they're never going to graduate from, but they're going to have a party for as many years as they can off of your hard work? I don't think so. That is not America. And so he's going to sit there and try and redistribute your hard-earned dollars. A friend of mine was saying just the other day he wants to sue the federal government because of the 320,000 migrants that were flown into the U.S., into different cities all over the country with his tax-paying dollars. In other words, this is our money. We should have some say over it. And his policies will do everything to decimate what we have, or have been able, miraculously in spite of him, to maybe grow. It's his policies that landed us with the inflation of 18%. It's his policies that have mortgages up 66%. Well, him and Jerome Powell and Chuck Schumer and some members of Congress as well, because they all just think you can keep on spending. I'll tell you, even the OMB is coming out and saying that this is not really sound. It is going to add to our deficit. He says, we're going to reduce our deficit. No, that's not what's happening. You can't print money. Argentina tell you this. All right, Malays out there trying to warn everybody at Davos. They're like, oh my gosh, who's this guy? You can't print money. And you know what, this wealth tax, I'll tell you what, go look at France. See how well that worked out for France. Remember they tried that wealth tax business? And what did everybody do? They left the country. Of course, Joe put in something, or the Democrats at some point, or somebody put in something under some administration that makes it really hard to check out of America. Because if you want to check out, they take 50% of everything you own. I'd like to know how they value it as well. Is that Letitia James who comes in and says, I think this is worth this and this is worth that? Unbelievable stuff. Listen, I don't think it's going to get to first base, but it gives you an insight, a window into how these people really think. And this is why it's so critical right now at this time that we all kind of pull together and we do what we need to do to make sure that we help preserve the greatness that is America.